If you're an entrepreneur, you know what it means to take personal and financial risks, create jobs that support your community, and devote most of your time to your business. But do you know how to plan for a successful exit from your business? Do you know who should be involved in creating your succession or transition plan and the steps along the way? Welcome to Finish Big, the podcast with Mark Dorman from Legacy Business Advisors. The podcast theme is inspired by critically acclaimed business author Bo Burlingham, author of Finish Big, How Great Entrepreneurs Exit Their Companies on Top. In this podcast, you'll hear success stories of exit plans done right and pick up practical tips based on years of Legacy Business Advisors' expertise and knowledge about the largest and most important financial transaction of your life. Now, on to the show.
Good day, and welcome to the Finish Big podcast. I'm your host, Mark Dorman, and today I am joined by a very special guest, who's become quite a good friend, and one of the most dynamic female business owners that I've ever met certainly of all the business owners I've met, but certainly in the manufacturing space. I want to introduce you to Tanya DiSalvo. Tanya is a graduate of the Bowling Green State University. She was born and raised in suburban Cleveland and is the third generation owner and chief executive officer of Criterion Tool. Criterion Tool is a dynamic manufacturing company that produces precision machine components for what is known as the no-failure industries: medical devices, aerospace, and weapons firing. Very interesting. We'll talk about that. She's been promoted and rewarding careers in manufacturing to the next generation is her passion, giving back, and I can speak to that firsthand. She's a great leader. She enjoys in her spare time being on the water, in boats, jet skis, or kayaks with her two adult children. Truly one of her favorite pastimes. Tanya DiSalvo, CEO of Criterion Tool, welcome to Finish Big.
Thanks, Mark. It sounds all impressive when you read it like that, but when you do the grind every day, it doesn't feel as good. So thank you. Nice to be here. Appreciate you having me.
What do they say? Don't call, just call me. Don't call me late for dinner. Just call me, right? So let's just dig right in. I want to touch on quite a few things today, but specifically, I mentioned in our intro that you went to Bowling Green State University. You and I both work in the Cleveland area. And women in manufacturing is really the niche of all niches. So first of all, take us back and tell us exactly what Criterion Tool does. What do you say the no-failure industry? Give us some specific examples for our listeners, please.
So the no-failure industries are, as we address it, is one, we're highly regulated, right? So the medical device components bring us through the FDA and the aerospace, the Department of Defense. So we're highly regulated, and no one wants to think about the bone screw or the implant or something that may not be done correctly, perfectly to the process. And no one wants to be on any type of airplane or think about a weapon firing that's not going to go correctly. So the end user has a big stake in the game of things just working. Things you don't even think about need to be done correctly to the print, so that everything it's involved with, because we are making just components, everything involved with happens and works the way it's supposed to. So we're machining parts from the size of the screws that hold your eyeglasses together to about the size of a softball. Pretty technical. It's not like, well, it's going to work anyway. There's some tight engineering specs that need to be met, and that's what the team does every day to get the parts out the door.
Yep. So, extremely low tolerances, correct?
Correct. So we're taking your hair and we're dividing it by 10, and we're holding things that precisely.
So, and give us, get maybe a little bit more granular. In the medical device industry, you've showed me when I visited your shop, it could be things that a screw or a hook that might reattach an ACL or a reconstructed shoulder. Am I correct?
So we'll do implants. It could be a facial implant. If you don't wear your seatbelt, crash your noggin into the front window and they have to put your face back together. We've done cranial implants where if you have a concussion and they have to remove a piece of your noggin to relieve the pressure and then put your skull back together. If you tear your rotator cuff, we're doing some implantable grade PEEK. It's a plastic. It's a virgin plastic material to put your rotator cuff and your labrum back together. ACLs. it's amazing how many ACL repair surgeries get done because we make a component called a button that's used for that, as well as some of the drills and instruments that go along with those types of surgeries. Even spinal surgery, people now, it's not uncommon to hear someone say, oh, I went in and had my L4, L5, and S1 fused together. And there's some screws that we make that are part of those processes. Wow. So pretty cool stuff. My favorite part of my job is either being out on the shop floor and seeing what we're doing, or sitting in front of a customer or potential customer's desk and learning about what problems they're having that we might be able to solve by making parts and, as I affectionately call it, widgets for them.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I've known you for 15 years, I would imagine. And you just shared with us that these are very, and obviously very low tolerance, highly technical parts, but you would describe yourself as being not a technical person. You've always said, hey, I'm a salesperson. I like to go out there, grow business, generate more revenue. How do you balance that inside Criterion?
That's a great question. And I had to learn that I have to ask a lot of questions, and I call them Tanya questions. Sometimes they seem really repetitive, but I want to be able to understand technically what you're telling me, kind of at a level that I understand it, so that I could turn around and repeat it to somebody else and they get it. So I have honed my question asking skills, I feel, over the years, because most of the people that I associate with assume I know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
It's really hard to say, hold on, time out, I don't. And you're going to have to back up. And sometimes it's a little uncomfortable because I have to be pretty vulnerable and say, well, I conceptually get it.
Yeah.
But
Talk to me like I'm a second grader, right?
Yeah. And so, yes. So it's unfortunate that sometimes I have to do that, but people are really, across all industries, customers, clients, vendors, they want you to get what they do for a living, and they're proud of it. So they don't necessarily, they're not offended by you asking a lot of questions, but sometimes it's just really hard to get what my guys are talking about or what the customers are talking about. And after a while, if I feel like I've built the bridge and other people get it, I kind of hang out in the background and wait for a next point to ask the next silly question. There's never a silly, stupid, ridiculous that doesn't happen in my world with my team. Because I got to ask it, because I just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So paint a picture for our listeners. If you were to take us out onto the Criterion floor, the manufacturing, are we looking at CNC equipment? Are we looking at, it's all stainless steel applications? Paint that picture for us, if you will.
This is my favorite visual. So I'm sure everyone has seen the picture of the iron workers in the 1950s sitting out on a steel girder. They look like a bunch of old Italian dudes eating their lunch, and their feet are dangling, hundreds of feet above New York City. People have an envision of machine shops that they're dark, they're dirty. They just don't even know. Maybe they've seen something on TV in the old days. Today, we have painted floors, white walls, we're an air-conditioned environment. A lot of things happen on a computer screen. It's very CNC. It looks like a kid's video game. If your kid's playing video games, they could learn how to program and run a CNC machine. So we're in a beautiful environment, actually. And everything is contained. Machining's happening within an enclosed area. So it's easy to keep things clean. So CNC stands for coordinate numerical controls, and everything now, there's very few manual machines left in our building. So chips are not flying all over. It's happening in an enclosed environment. So when you're working with and making parts that are the size of the screws that hold your eyeglasses together for some of the implants, dental, facial, whatever the case may be, out of a piece of spaghetti diameter material that's 12 feet long, it's pretty precise. Right. So you open that box of spaghetti and hold a noodle in your hand. Sometimes that's the size of the bar stock we're using, and it's 12 feet long. And when you're making a little tiny screw, you get a whole bunch out of a big 12-foot bar. Yeah. So it's pretty precise. Some people show up, and these big burly men with their big burly hands that are used to doing big outside work things. And then they come in here and they have to hold these little tiny screws. The finger dexterity and the ability to hold some of these parts, it's a big deal. It's very different. There's lots of manufacturing in the world. We just happen to play in that smaller sandbox, but there's, lots of big things made, but this is the environment that we've chosen to operate in.
Yeah. So in addition to the medical industry that you serve, it's also aerospace. It's also weapons. Are these longer term contracts? Are you awarded business? How does that process work?
A combination of things. Sometimes we're just a problem solver for a customer where they just have issue an individual purchase order to solve a problem. Our goal obviously is to earn the right to keep coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we get to start at the beginning when we're part of the engineering process, and we are involved and we get to talk about design for manufacturing and what makes sense, what's going to make sense long term, what can we actually make. I mean, square holes, ha ha ha, but engineers draw some crazy stuff. We can make a square hole, just not practical or cost effective. But if that's really what you need, it can be done. Somebody else is going to come along with a better mousetrap and make it less expensive. And that's one of the easy things. So we'd like to be involved in the beginning part of the process. We then always enjoy being awarded that business long-term on some kind of contractual level. So we have the opportunity to work out all the kinks, beat the cost down, be the best service provider we can be for our customers, so that we're a vendor of choice when the next project comes up. Because it's not always about what are you doing for me now or lately, but what can we do for you in the future? So in order to build those bridges and relationships, you got to make good parts. You got to deliver them on time. What's interesting to me that I didn't foresee when I got involved in the kind of the family business is that manufacturing is the ultimate team sport. Nothing happens here in a silo or a bubble. It requires effort from multiple people, from quoting it, engineering it, getting the tooling in, machining it, deburring it, packaging it, inspecting it, getting out the door. There's an entire crew that it takes to touch every single part to get it out the door. And I never really thought about that. I never really envisioned being kind of the coach of the team like that. I just wanted to go. So that was probably the biggest adjustment as I stepped into the leadership role, was that.
Yeah, learning and gaining that perspective. So I want to go back. You mentioned your initial foray into Criterion Tool. You went to Bowling Green State University, home of the Falcons.
Yep.
What did you do after graduating? Did you go from BGSU? Did you go right into the family business? And what was did your dad start the business? Your grandfather start the business? What was the story there?
So my grandfather started the business in 1953. So this is our 70th anniversary. And he started it in a garage and ultimately moved into a building with a partner, as the story family lore goes. And then my dad and my uncle worked together for many years during the Vietnam era in the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. My dad went to Bowling Green and my uncle was working in the shop together. And over time, they helped my grandpa build the business. My grandpa passed away, I think it was like early 80s. And my dad and my uncle took over the business and ran it together for many years. And they just had different philosophies, kind of had the family divorce thing over time. So my uncle moved away and went up to Northern Michigan, and my mom and dad took over as partners. And at that time, my mom was the president of the company, and they were a family business, female owned. Back in those days, we're located here in Cleveland, Ohio, close to NASA. And there was, some work that could be done that was 45208A was like the military spec at the time. And there was a little bit to be said for being a female owned business at that time. And they were in a 5,000 square foot building in Berea, Ohio, off of Thacker Street, which is now close to the Browns training facility. And so that's where the company was until 1995. And then we moved into the facility we're in Brook Park. When I graduated from Bowling Green, I wanted to be as far away from my dad as I could. I was always the kid in trouble. I didn't ask for permission. I begged for forgiveness. If there was a line, I found it and crossed it. I couldn't wait to go to school to get out of the house. I couldn't wait to go to school to make money. All I wanted to do was sell stuff and drive a sports car. That was like my goal. So I graduated from Bowling Green with a degree in sports management because I really struggled with the economics and calculus for a business management degree. So
join the club.
Truth be told, I really liked the sports management. I played tennis, so I thought that would be a fun career. And I liked the pressure of the game of the sports management deal, knowing that the tickets had to be sold for today's game by today because nobody wants to buy them tomorrow. So that was always intriguing to me. But I jumped right into sales. I worked for a private club downtown, and then I got some great training through Dale Carnegie programs. I was a salesperson for them, and I worked for Coca-Cola for a while. So I bounced around in some pretty technical sales jobs. I was in the automotive aftermarket, and I just enjoyed understanding my product really well, finding people that wanted to buy it, and figuring out how to tell them that we had the best thing that they needed.
That,
So the sales aspect was pretty natural to me. When I came on board, my Criterion, my dad had just moved in this building and needed some additional business. So I said, well, geez, I could sell.
yeah. So was there some type of mea culpa moment where you said, Dad, my rebel years are behind me. I want to come back and work
No,
and be part of the team?
no, I wish
How did that go?
I wish there was like some fairy tale moment like that. But to be honest with you, I was traveling quite a bit. And I think I was in Vegas for like 2 weeks for the SEMA show, which is a big car automotive show. And I just was so tired of being on the road. And that's before travel was awful. And so I actually mailed my dad my resume. I saw the ad in the Sun newspaper, and I sent my dad my resume. I'm like, hey, if you're going to hire a salesperson.
Your dad was advertising for a salesperson for Criterion Tool.
Yep. And I applied.
Unbeknownst to you.
Yep. And I applied. So when I came to, this is a funny little tidbit, but when I came to talk to my dad about the job, I met with his advisor, his financial advisor. And just to give you like some scale on that, he was from Ernst & Ernst, right? So we've had Ernst & Young, we've had Ernst & Winnie, Ernst & Young, now it's E&Y. So he was a wily veteran. And he says, geez, I don't know why you'd want to get involved in the family business, because, you know, multiple generations tend to fail. And there's like 3 scenarios. And the scenario number 1 is you don't get involved in the family business. Your folks pass away, they die, and you get the money. Everyone's happy. Second scenario is you get involved in the family business. You hate your parents because you can't get along. You want to do it your way. He's going to be around forever. You have a falling out. You don't talk to them.
And nobody's happy.
Yep. They die and you get the money, but you lose a bunch of years. And the third scenario, which never happens, is you get involved in the family business. They leave you alone. You work your butt off. The business may or may not succeed because the succession rate for a third generation is like less than 10%.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe they die and maybe there's some money, but you worked your butt off in between. So why would you take option 3? I said, because it sounds like fun.
Yeah.
And here we are.
Because I'm a competitive tennis player and I like to compete, right? So let's move along here. So your role initially, obviously your dad hired you. I can imagine the look on his face. It's Dennis is your father, correct?
Yes.
He must have opened up that envelope with your resume and said, oh, for God's sake, right, here we go. So you were hired in as a salesperson in an industry, not only that you knew nothing about, but as a female in manufacturing. This was probably what, in the 90s, I suspect.
Yep.
And so your role initially was in sales. What was the evolution of your role?
The evolution was I left my sales and marketing job for many publications in the automotive aftermarket, company based out of Akron, on a Friday. And I rolled in here on a Monday at 6 a.m. because I worked in the shop. I needed to get some experience on what we did. So I was a shop employee. And at that time we were working 60 hours a week, 6 10-hour days, 6 a.m. to like 5:30 p.m. So I go from lunching and picking up my dry cleaning and an occasional round of golf,
driving your sports car,
to bell to bell in a building. I had no idea what was going on, all kinds of crazy things. And nobody would talk to me because I was the boss's daughter, of which I knew some of these guys because I had done odds and ends jobs throughout high school and did mailings and things like that. So I had been around the shop, but not in the shop. So I know this is a podcast and you can't see, but I've always prided myself on having a really nice manicure and nice nails. So the first thing I was told to do is pull parts out of a tumbler, which is a big, gigantic vibratory thing with rocks in it. And as I pulled them all out, off came all my nail polish, had to take my jewelry off. Like I stopped. I mean, no one cares what you look like at 6 o'clock in the morning. So baseball hats and the all natural look were a thing. But I worked out in the shop for about a year. I did a lot of education with retired old machinists on how to read blueprints, how to understand. Again, let's go back to the math skills, decimals, tolerances, equivalents, fractions, the language that's used in a shop, the etiquette in a shop, what's safe, what's not safe. in the inspection department, there's a big piece of granite. Our inspection department's climate controlled. And you work on this granite because you can hone it and be sure it's perfectly smooth. So we get it calibrated every year. And I had a bag of Cheerios sitting off to the side. I was doing some paperwork. And I had a Diet Coke, because that's my poison in the morning. I don't drink coffee, sitting on the granite. And the pop can was sweating. And for everybody that's listening that knows anything about manufacturing, you don't ever want to put that on an unsealed surface. And the wily old veteran that was my teacher, his name was Walter Zupan, walked in when he used a cane, and he called me off to the side and told me to get something off to the left. And he took his cane and he swiped it across that granite and knocked everything I was working on right off. And he says, "Don't you ever put a piece of pop can or food on that. That is an inspection device. Your grandpa's turning over in his grave." And I'm like, whoa, nobody told me, dude. It's okay. I'm okay. I got the memo. So I had a lot of those moments. Yep. When I started that first year. I think it was really helpful.
A little dose of humble pie, right?
It wasn't that I thought, most people thought it was because I thought I was better than somebody else. I just didn't. I didn't know. Yeah, I learned a lot. I paid a lot of attention to what was going on. So that was really helpful. And you learn in a shop that a lot is what it sounds like, what it looks like. I hear what you're telling me, but how come you're sweating if we're doing okay? Like, why are things we should take, they take 10 minutes a piece. There should be 6 an hour. How come we only have 3 and we've been doing this for 3 hours? I don't understand. So those kind of things I quickly processed, and didn't make me a fan favorite.
Gotcha. So moving on, I mean, was Criterion in the precision tool manufacture or precision parts manufacturing at that time, or did the company, while you were evolving, not only in your comfort level and level of experience in the manufacturing business, was the company also kind of evolving and changing along at the same time?
It was. The official legal name is Criterion Tool and Die Incorporated. And my dad and my uncle did tool and die work, and then they augmented that with machining some parts, because the process of machining tools and dies is very long. So from a cash flow standpoint, it was very complicated to be able to float everything. So they would machine parts and do kind of side jobs while they were doing their real job, so that they would have some cash flow. So when my dad moved into this building, he really got away from the tool and die work, as I understand it, and got more into making component parts for different things. Precision, yes, but not to the level that we're doing it today. I think that has definitely been an evolution that my dad and I worked on together, and then I really stepped up on after he was gone from the business, because it's difficult to, it's easy to be better than 50% of the crew.
Sure,
right?
sure.
And it's okay to be better than 75%, but if you want to go from 75% to the top 85 to 90%, that's where it really takes a lot of effort, process, dollars, and focus. And so we really applied that once I understood where the value add was, and it was there. So that's what I started focusing on. About 2010, I bought my dad out in 2010.
I was going to ask, what was your ascent to ownership at Criterion? And obviously, and we're with Tanya DiSalvo, CEO of Criterion Tool, here today. Your ascent to ownership, and was that a fairly efficient process at the time, or was there any friction between you and your dad? It seems to me we work with you. You've become a very good friend and one of my favorite clients. You have you can just feel a tremendous amount of love and respect for your father. Seems like that's a very, very good relationship today. Was it that way when the baton was being passed?
It's funny that you say that. And it was because my dad, I think, quit his dad for a nickel. Right. So we could go back and have this beautiful corporate minute book. And so he was making $2.50 an hour in whatever year that was. And he wanted to be making $2.75. And my grandpa told me he was going to give him a nickel raise to $2.55 an hour. My dad said, go pound salt, I guess. And he quit and moved along. So we talked about that, is he never wanted me to feel that way. And when I started, Mark, I'll be honest with you, I didn't see myself running the business. I don't know I didn't really see a path. I just thought it was cool doing the sales. And after I spent my year of apprenticeship training on the shop floor, and then it was kind of operationally, right? If you start making decisions, I don't know that I always had all the right information, but I wasn't afraid to pull the trigger. So by default, I started kind of taking on more responsibility. And we worked with a small business guy that we had met at a National Tooling and Machining Association event. And we went to a family business function. And I'm looking at 92-year-old fathers with 65-year-old sons and then 24-year-old grandsons.
I know some of those people.
And I looked at my dad and I said, if that's what that's going to be, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want you around till you're 90, me doing this at 70 under your tutelage. So we definitely gonna have to have some kind of plan. And if that's what you think is supposed to happen, then we have to recalibrate. Because I just remember like looking at that, all those generations, right? Super cool, but that's not what I saw myself doing, because dad still comes in to open the mail, and the son who's in his late 60s or 60s is still asking for permission to do things. And that just clearly wasn't my style, going back to when I to get out of the house in college. So the path was, when my dad said, okay, so you think you want to do this? How long do you think it's going to take? And I said, I don't know, a year or two. And he goes, do you think you know enough to do this? And I said, well, I don't know. What else do I need to know? How hard could it be?
How hard could it be?
I don't know that I even knew what I didn't even know that I needed to know.
Sure.
So our path was actually 7 years. We spent 7 years kind of working on the business.
Take note, listeners. 7 years. 7 years.
7 years of a path, right? So fortunately, my dad was healthy. My dad's 82, 81 this year, 82 this year, 81. So I think relinquishing control was a big deal for him. And I'm not sure he trusted. I mean, I was a little bit of a hothead. I grew up with it's my way or the highway. I grew up with a tough leader. And my dad, I thought that's how you did things. So sometimes he with the biggest stick won. That's how I thought the game was played. And I have since learned it's way better if you just ask for everybody's help than pretend you know all of it. But my dad did know a lot. I'm totally hamstrung by the fact that I can't run a machine. I can talk a little more technical now, but my comfort level with the complexity of the business today is different than my dad's was. He was a practitioner of the business, top to bottom, inside and out. And I am not. I'm a practitioner of the office in the front of the house. And I really have to rely on people on the back of the house to get things done. But we started with just talking about it with anybody that would listen, the banker, the attorney, the whoever, the team,
the lawyer, the business coach. I mean, that's one thing that's really impressed me. And I've shared this with you when we speak, is you're quick to self-deprecate, understand where your blind spots are, seek advice from people that can help you, and really cherish the talent that you have in the back of the house, as you refer to it. So let me just, as we kind of wind down the show here, where does Criterion stand today? How many employees do you have? And what are some of your goals for the future?
So today I'm going to say about 33 employees.
Wow.
We're on one shift. COVID knocked us back a couple of notches there. We're having a great year, record year, and super proud of everybody that's been involved. I think that's one of the most interesting things. Was I felt like I had to take on a lot of that burden myself. People want to know that their leader knows what they're doing. And I have a game plan, but I really had a tough time getting it out on paper and getting it to the point that they understood the game plan. So they weren't playing whack-a-mole with their daily activities and monthly and quarterly goals and everything like that. So I feel like we're much better in that regard, and we're pulling as a team. And my ultimate goal somewhere down the road, and it could be 10 years from now, is to sell the business, because my kids are not interested in it. So the most important thing to me right now in this moment is to build the best business we can build, because we're in it every day. So we need to be doing the right things every day. I want everybody to come to work. One of our not core competencies, but one of our goals is fun. You got to have fun when you're at work. All those precision industries and all the regulatory stuff that we deal with, that's built into our system. So I'd like to help my team grow and expand. I'd like to continue to build the business, and at some day find the perfect owner for it, whether we're part of an acquisition process for a larger company, or somebody that wants to be involved in manufacturing and does have the family structure to pass it on. I think that that's cool. But building success within the organization, and then promoting rewarding careers in manufacturing so that mom and dad know that their 15-year-old who may not be ready for college can come into the trade, get involved with an organization when they graduate from high school, not have to worry about college debt, and make a really good living. That's important stuff.
Yeah, definitely. Amen. Amen. So in closing, give us some advice for not only women in business, but women in manufacturing. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask that question.
That's a great question. And I'm excited to say that there are a lot more women in manufacturing.
I would agree.
The first association event I went to, I was asked to get coffee. So I feel like that doesn't happen anymore.
I'm sure that went over like a lead balloon.
I feel like I'm excited to say that maybe when we talk about manufacturing, we can just talk about the best people in manufacturing, regardless of whether it's male or female. Yeah. But what's exciting to me is there are a lot more women engineers. There's a lot more women, obviously, in the front of the house, in the back of the house, in quality. And if that fires you up, whatever fires you up, you got to stick with it. And you just have to find a company that's going to be supportive of that. And I think today, what we have seen over the course of time is we're all fighting for talent. And so there's a lot of very talented women that may not have been in manufacturing that are very capable of stepping in, because short of running a machine, and some of them aren't very good at that, it's business, it's people, processes, and equipment. And it's a team. So if you can organize that, welcome on board.
Yeah. You got a place in business. You got a place in any industry.
That's right.
Our guest today has been Tanya DiSalvo. Tanya is the CEO of Criterion Tool and Die, located in Cleveland, Ohio. Tanya, how would people get a hold of you, or how would they find Criterion?
Criterion's on the World Wide Web at www.criteriontool.com. Got a fantastic website. If you Google Tanya DiSalvo, I've got all kinds of information. I'm posting on social media all the time because I think making stuff is cool. So you can find us that way. And we also have LinkedIn profiles for both Criterion Tool and Tanya DiSalvo.
Awesome. Tanya, thank you so much for being on Finish Big, the podcast. This is your host, Mark Dorman. Thank you for listening, folks, and here's to finishing big. Have a great day.
We hope you enjoyed listening to Finish Big, the podcast with Mark Dorman from Legacy Business Advisors. Click the follow button to be notified when new episodes are available. Learn more at legacybusinessadvisors.com or call 330-350-5410. Please be aware the information in these podcasts represent the views and opinions of our guests and do not necessarily represent the views or opinions of Legacy Business Advisors. The content is for informational and educational purposes only. The content is not intended to be a substitute for professional tax or legal advice. Always seek the advice of your legal or tax professional with any questions regarding your specific situation.